Wichita, Kansas, the year 2004. If you walked into Christ Lutheran Church on a Sunday morning, you would feel absolute peace. The scent of candles, lights shimmering through stained glass windows, and hymns soothing the soul. And the man standing up on that high pulpit, the one leading the service, is the pride of the entire parish. His name is Dennis Rader. To the people of Wichita, Dennis is the embodiment of a model citizen. A white, middle-aged man, always with a smile on his lips and ready to help anyone. Look at his resume. It is perfect enough to be envied. Dennis isn't just an ordinary member. He is the president of the church council, a position reserved only for those with the most shining morality. He is also the leader of the local Boy Scout troop, the man teaching kids about survival skills and courage. As for his private life, not a single blemish. A faithful husband married for over 30 years to Paula, a devoted father of 2 grown and successful children. In the eyes of the neighbors, the Rader family is a symbol of the American dream. The trust placed in Dennis is absolute. He holds the keys to the church. He manages the finances. He is the first to arrive and the last to leave. People say, if there is any difficulty, find Dennis. He will solve it. But Dennis Rader doesn't just live on donations. His main job is the compliance officer for Park City. What is his duty? Maintaining order for the neighborhood. He catches stray dogs. He measures the height of the grass in your garden, and if it exceeds the limit by 1 centimeter, he will fine you. Neighbors might find him a bit difficult, a bit rigid, but they think, that's just an old man dedicated to his job. Little do they know that rigidity is the first sign of a control freak monster. But there is another Dennis Rader, a Dennis that his wife doesn't know, his children don't know, and even his God has to turn away from. When standing on the pulpit reading about salvation, in his head he is fantasizing about rope knots. When patrolling to catch stray dogs, his eyes are searching for houses with open windows. He doesn't serve God. He serves something he calls Factor X, the demon of lust screaming inside him. He gave himself a name that caused the entire city of Wichita to lose sleep for 30 years. B, bind. T, torture. K, kill. How could a model church council president be the most brutal killer in Kansas history? How could he wash the blood off his hands to hold the Bible every Sunday morning? The answer lies in the perfect mask he wore his entire life. Welcome to Strange Frequency. Today we step into the mind of BTK. January 15, 1974. It was a freezing winter morning in Wichita. At house number 803, North Edgemore, the Otero family was starting their day like any other family. January 15, 1974. It was a freezing winter morning in Wichita. At house number 803, North Edgemore, the Otero family was starting their day like any other family. Joseph Otero, an Air Force veteran, and his wife, Julie. They had a peaceful life with obedient children, but they didn't know that they had been marked. Dennis Rader had been watching them for weeks. He observed when Joseph went to work, when the kids went to school. He called them Project Otero, 8 a.m. When the older children had gone to school and Joseph was preparing to take the younger ones, Rader decided to act. He wore dark clothing, a ski mask, and carried a bag full of tools. Before knocking on the door, Rader did something that became his signature, cutting the phone lines. He went around the back of the house using pliers to sever the line of communication with the outside world. This action carries a terrifying meaning. Once he steps inside, no one will come to save them, and no one can call for help. The house becomes an isolated island. Rader broke into the house through the back door. He pointed a gun at Joseph Otero. Joseph was a former boxer, a strong man. He could have completely taken Rader down, but Rader used a psychological weapon sharper than any knife: deceit. He said, "I'm wanted by the police. I need money, food, and a car. Do as I say and no one will get hurt." Joseph believed him. He thought it was just a robbery. To protect his wife and children, he agreed to cooperate. He let Rader tie him up. But as soon as Joseph was tied up, Rader's demeanor changed. He didn't take the money. He didn't take the car. He began to tighten the knots. He enjoyed the fear in their eyes. He tied up Julie, 9-year-old Joey, and 11-year-old Josephine. What happened in the next 45 minutes was a nightmare no words can describe. Rader didn't rush. He tormented them psychologically before killing them one by one. Joseph was bound and suffocated with a plastic bag. Julie was strangled with a rope. And cruelest of all were the two children. He hung 11-year-old Josephine from a water pipe in the basement. He watched her struggle until she died. After finishing the job, he took Joseph's watch and a radio as souvenirs, then silently left like a ghost. 3 p.m. The 3 older Otero children came home from school. They saw the family dog outside in the yard, barking incessantly. They walked into the house calling for their parents. "Dad! Mom!" But there was no answer. Only a deadly silence enveloped the cold house. When the police arrived, they were in shock. A veteran officer had to vomit right at the scene. They had never seen a crime so brutal and calculated in Wichita. No signs of forced entry, no major assets stolen. What was the motive? That day, the innocence of Wichita died. People rushed to buy guns and install extra locks. They no longer dared to leave their doors unlocked when sleeping, because they knew there was a monster lurking out there, a killer who killed not for money, but for pleasure, and he was still free. After the Otero massacre, the entire city of Wichita drowned in fear, but it was also full of false rumors. Police suspected a gangland hit or a debt collection gone wrong. No one thought of a random serial killer. This made Dennis Rader extremely angry. He had performed a masterpiece of crime, yet no one recognized his talent. He felt insulted that the police thought he was just a common thug. He wanted the world to know who he was. He wanted respect. Rader idolized famous killers like Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac. He saw that they had nicknames, signatures, and played cat and mouse games with the police. He decided, it is time for me to step into the light. October 1974. Rader entered the Wichita Public Library. He didn't come to borrow books. He came to leave a message. He headed to the mechanical engineering section, a detail showing his intellectual arrogance. He chose the book, Applied Engineering Mechanics. He slipped a letter between the pages, then quietly left. Later, he called a local newspaper, directing them to the exact location. Go to the library engineering book, page 35. When the reporter found the letter, he realized immediately this was no prank. The letter contained details only the killer could know: the number of knots on the ropes, the clothing the victims wore, and details about the missing watch. The content of the letter was a chilling look into the mind of a madman. He wrote, "I am sorry for what happened to the Otero family. It's hard to control myself. When the monster enters my brain, I don't know what I'm doing." He blamed it on something he called Factor X. He believed a supernatural force, a demon of lust, drove him to kill, not his own free will. That was how he justified his conscience. At the end of the letter, he suggested the press give him a nickname. He offered a few catchy ones: the Poetry Strangler, the Garrote Phantom. But there was one name that was the shortest, most concise, and most brutal. B, bind, T, torture, K, kill. That was his workflow: cold, mechanical, ruthless. The press immediately grabbed that name, the BTK Strangler. Rader had achieved his goal. He was no longer a nameless killer. He had a brand. The entire city of Wichita now knew they were living with a monster who liked to bind and torture victims. Fear became his power. The next morning, Dennis Rader went to church again, smiling and greeting everyone as if nothing had happened. In his breast pocket, right next to his heart, was the newspaper printed with the name he gave himself, BTK. To most of us, human beings are individuals with emotions, with families. But for Dennis Rader, they were just projects. He used engineering and construction terminology to refer to his victims. This helped him detach his emotions, turning murder into a checklist that needed to be completed. A project began with observation. Rader spent weeks, even months, stalking his targets. He took meticulous notes. What time do they leave for work? What time do they return? Do they have a dog? Is the back door locked? He was as patient as a spider weaving its web. He considered this a black op, secret operation. He imagined himself as James Bond or a super spy. He relished the feeling of power in knowing everything about the victims, while they had no idea of his existence. Rader always carried a bag with him that he called a hit kit. It looked like an ordinary bowling bag, but inside was a nightmare. A .357 Magnum pistol, handcuffs, ski mask, black tape, and most importantly, rope. Inside the bag contained everything needed to subdue a family: a gun to threaten, handcuffs to lock, tape to gag. But the most haunting item was the ropes. He pre-tied complex knots right at home, or even right at his church office. He learned these knot-tying techniques from his time as a Boy Scout. Skills used to save people were now used to take lives. However, not every project went smoothly. In April 1974, he attacked Catherine Bright, but the young woman fought back fiercely. The plan to bind and torture failed. Rader panicked. He shot her and fled. This case made him angry because it was imperfect. He retreated into the shadows to learn from his mistakes. He waited 3 years. In 1977, he returned with redoubled cruelty. Shirley Vian was killed right in front of her young children. Nancy Fox was strangled with pantyhose. Each case was a session for him to perfect his skills. He became colder, more controlled. After killing Nancy Fox, he even called the police to report the news. "You will find a body at this address?" That is the work of BTK. His arrogance had reached its peak. Inside the hit kit bag, there was also an iconic item: the mask. Sometimes he wore a ski mask. Sometimes it was an emotionless white plastic mask with dark black eyebrows drawn on. Why wear a mask when the victims were blindfolded or about to die? Because the mask helped him detach himself from the persona of Dennis Rader, the kind father. When putting the mask on, he became BTK. He had no conscience, no pity. He became the embodiment of a nightmare. And when the job was done, he put the mask away, washed his hands, and went back to being the president of the church council. He lived between two parallel worlds without any remorse. That is the very definition of a psychopath. In 1991, Dennis Rader accepted a new job in Park City, a suburb of Wichita. His title, compliance officer. It sounds imposing, but in reality, he was the dog catcher, the building permit inspector, and the man who measured weed height. To others, this was a boring job, but to Rader, it was a dream come true. He got to wear a uniform. He got to wear a badge. He even carried a gun on his own accord, even though regulations didn't require it. He felt like a real police officer. He loved power, even the pettiest kind. He used this position not to serve the community, but to satisfy his grandiose ego, imposing rules upon others. Neighbors in Park City absolutely hated Rader. He was notorious for being petty and nitpicky. There was a rule: grass could not be taller than 6 inches, 15 centimeters. Rader would patrol with a tape measure. If your grass was 6.1 inches, he would write a citation immediately, no leniency, no warnings. A neighbor recounted he acted like a Nazi. He liked seeing people afraid or upset. When residents protested, Rader would glare, rest his hand on his holster, threatening to call the police or arrest them. He was a textbook bully, and most terrifying was how he treated animals. As the dog catcher, he frequently administered overdoses of tranquilizers or treated stray dogs brutally. That was where he vented his rage when he couldn't kill humans. But this job also gave him a deadly advantage no one suspected: access to information. As a city employee, he knew who lived where, who lived alone, which houses had new tenants, and which houses had no men. He could drive around patrolling neighborhoods, stopping to observe any house he wanted without suspicion. Oh, that's just the city truck doing inspections. No one knew that sitting inside that truck was BTK, selecting his next project. The uniform was a skeleton key. He could knock on any door saying, "I need to check the water lines," or "I need to check property boundaries." And residents would open the door. They opened the door for the wolf because the wolf was wearing sheep's clothing. This is the ultimate irony of the Dennis Rader case. By day, he was the strictest law enforcer, punishing the smallest infractions. By night, he was the most brutal lawbreaker, stripping away human rights to life. Criminal psychology explains this with one keyword: control. Whether writing a ticket for tall grass or strangling a woman, his ultimate goal remained the same: control. He wanted the world to operate according to his will. But in the early 90s, after getting this job, the killing suddenly stopped. It seemed that bullying neighbors helped relieve some of his thirst for power, or had he found another way to satisfy his urges without actually killing? He began to hibernate, but this hibernation was just as morbid as his waking state. After the final murder in 1991, victim Dolores Davis, BTK suddenly vanished. 1 year passed, 5 years, then 10 years. No letters, no murders bearing his mark. The Wichita police began to breathe a sigh of relief. Criminologists proposed many theories. Maybe he died of old age. Maybe he was imprisoned for another crime. Or maybe he moved to Florida to retire. They called this the cooling off period, but they were wrong. He didn't go anywhere. He was still there, right in the suburbs of Wichita. He was busy being church council president, busy being a Boy Scout leader, busy getting his kids into college. He didn't stop desiring to kill, he just learned how to manage his addiction. When his wife and children were fast asleep, or when they were away, Dennis Rader retreated into his private sanctuary, the basement, or sometimes the empty office of the church. Here he didn't need to wear the mask of a good man. He let the monster, Factor X, out to play. He kept trophies of all his victims. Nancy Fox's driver's license, Shirley Vian's jewelry, crime scene photos he took secretly. He called these boxes his treasure chests. He took them out, admired them, and caressed them to relive the power of those past murders. For a serial killer, memory is a drug. When he couldn't go on a real hunt, due to age and fear of capture, he used these keepsakes to get high in his mind. But just looking wasn't enough. Rader began to perform the most bizarre and morbid act of all. He turned himself into the victim. He set the camera on a timer. He wore the female victim's clothing. He wore a plastic mask with a female face painted on it. He bound his own hands and feet with complex bondage knots. He even buried himself in a pit in the garden. Then he took photos of himself. Why? Why would a killer want to play the victim? Psychologists suggest he wanted to experience the entire process of death. He was the director, the lead actor, and the audience. He lived in that sick fantasy world for 13 years. Besides taking photos, Rader wrote, he wrote thousands of diary pages describing every murder, every emotion, and every mistake in detail. He redrew crime scene diagrams, sketched victim positions. He was preparing a legacy for the ages. He hid these documents everywhere, in filing cabinets at work, under the church floorboards, in the bed of his truck. He lived right next to the evidence that could send him to the electric chair, but no one knew. "Dennis, come up for dinner." Just one call from his wife, and the monster crawled back into its cave. Dennis Rader adjusted his clothes, turned off the basement light, and walked up to the kitchen to have dinner with his family like a model husband. His compartmentalization was terrifyingly perfect. But this silence was about to end, because his ego was about to be awakened. January 2004, the 30th anniversary of the Otero family massacre. The Wichita Press begins publishing retrospective pieces on the case. A book titled Nightmare in Wichita is about to be published. People start talking about BTK again. But what they are saying is not what Dennis Rader wants to hear. On TV, experts speculate BTK might have died of old age. He might be in prison for another crime. Or worse, he was just an incompetent has-been. These comments are like slaps to Rader's face. He isn't dead. He is alive and well, serving as the church council president and finding neighbors every single day. For a narcissist like Rader, being considered dead or washed up is more painful than being caught. His massive ego will not allow the world to forget him. He thinks, these fools dare to underestimate me. I will show them who is truly in control. He decides he must prove his identity. He needs a piece of evidence that only the real BTK would possess. Evidence that the police had never released to the public. He finds it in an old box. The driver's license of victim Vicky Wegerle. Vicky Wegerle was murdered in 1986. Police knew it was a homicide, but they never definitively confirmed it was the work of BTK. Rader kept her license and the crime scene photos as souvenirs. Now it is his ticket back to the main stage. He photocopies the license. He drafts a new letter using his familiar symbols and codes. He is preparing to send his bomb to the media. The Wichita Eagle receives a strange envelope. The return address reads, Bill Thomas Kilman, initials BTK. When the reporter opens the envelope, a driver's license falls onto the desk. Silence engulfs the newsroom. They recognize the woman in the photo immediately. Police are called urgently. Experts confirm it is the original. Only the killer could possess it. The message is clear. I am back. The nightmare has awakened. The entire city of Wichita is shaken to its core. The most terrifying serial killer in its history is not dead. He is still out there, still watching, and still holding terrible secrets. Rader sits at home, watching the city's panic on the evening news. He feels a rush of adrenaline coursing through his body. He is old now. He no longer has the strength to climb through windows or wrestle with victims, but he doesn't need to kill to feel power. He just needs to send letters. He begins playing a new level of cat and mouse. He sends bound dolls. He sends poems and word puzzles, challenging the police to find him. He thinks he is a criminal mastermind, manipulating the police like puppets. But Rader forgot one thing. The world of 2004 is very different from 1974. In 1974, there was no DNA, no CCTV, and no digital computers. Rader still thinks like a criminal from the last century. He thinks he is smarter than technology, and that blind confidence is the trap he set for himself. To communicate with Dennis Rader without scaring him off, the Wichita police established a special communication channel through the newspaper's classified ads. Rader called himself Rex. The police played the role of the listener. He loved this game. He felt like a spy in the Cold War exchanging secret codes. He sent messages by hiding letters inside cereal boxes, then surreptitiously placing them in random public locations. He wanted to send the police his masterpiece, a long manuscript detailing the life and crimes of BTK. But he faced a major problem. The manuscript was too long to type out. He wanted to send a digital file, but Rader was a 60-year-old man living in 2004. He had heard that the police could trace computers. He was paranoid, but laziness and the burning desire to publish his book pushed him forward. He decided to ask the police directly. In a letter sent via a cereal box, Rader asked a question so naive that the police couldn't believe their eyes. "Can I communicate with floppy disk and not be traced to a computer? Be honest. Be honest." A brutal serial killer, a man who strangled children, was asking the police to play nice with him? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Lieutenant Ken Landwehr had to make an ethical decision: tell the truth or lie. Of course they lied. They knew that floppy disks contained metadata, but they needed Rader to believe he was safe. They posted an ad in the paper. "Rex, it will be okay." Rader read the newspaper and bought it hook, line, and sinker. He thought the police respected him as a worthy adversary. He thought there was a code of honor between the hunter and the prey. Narcissism had blinded him. He didn't think of himself as a criminal. He thought he was a VIP negotiating with the authorities. He brought a purple Memorex floppy disk to the church, where he had access to the office computer. He copied the text file containing the BTK memoirs onto the floppy disk. He had no idea that every time he clicked save, the computer was silently recording the username and location deep within the file's source code. He prepared the package carefully. He even taped a few decorations onto the disk to make it look nice. He was wrapping up his own death warrant with his own hands and express mailing it to the police. February 16th, 2005. The package was found. Inside was a necklace, a piece of cardboard, and the main character, the purple 1.44 megabyte floppy disk. The forensic experts held their breath. Was the disk corrupted? Did he encrypt it? They put the disk into the drive. The text file opened. The content was just BTK bragging, but that wasn't what they needed. They needed the shell. The expert right-clicked the file, selected properties. A small window appeared, and inside it contained 2 lines of text that would end 31 years of terror in Wichita. What were those 2 lines? We are about to find out. The purple floppy disk is inserted into the machine. The experts at the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, KBI, begin their work. Rader thought he had deleted the old files on the disk, but he didn't know that the delete button doesn't actually erase data. It just marks that space as empty to be overwritten later. The EnCase software quickly finds a Microsoft Word document that was deleted but not yet fully overwritten. It wasn't a letter from BTK, it was an agenda for a church council meeting. And this is the fateful moment. In the metadata section, the computer records exactly who created and edited this file. The text appears crystal clear: last saved by Dennis, organization, Christ Lutheran Church. Dennis at Christ Lutheran Church. That was all they needed. The police didn't need to mobilize helicopters or special forces. They just needed Google. A detective types the church's name into the search bar and accesses their official website. And there, right on the homepage, in the list of parish leadership, President of the Council, Dennis Rader. 31 years of hunting, millions of dollars in investigation costs, and finally the identity of the killer lay publicly on a religious website. Police immediately look up the name Dennis Rader. Address, Park City. Occupation, compliance officer. Vehicle, a black Jeep Cherokee, matching the description of the vehicle seen near the crime scenes. All the puzzle pieces fitted together perfectly. But to arrest and convict him in court, the name on the floppy disk wasn't enough. They needed biological evidence. DNA. Police knew Rader's daughter, Carrie Rawson, had once sought medical treatment at the Kansas University Medical Clinic. They obtained a court order to collect Carrie's old pap smear sample. From this sample, they isolated her DNA and compared it with the semen BTK left at the Otero family crime scene 30 years ago. According to the laws of genetics, the DNA of a father and daughter will match by 50%. The result returned a match. There was no longer any doubt. Church Council President Dennis Rader was BTK. An arrest warrant was issued immediately. Noon, February 25th, 2005. Dennis Rader is driving home for lunch as he does every day. He still thinks the police are reading his floppy disk and will post a reply in the newspaper. He is daydreaming about the next chapter of his memoir. Suddenly, his world collapses. Dozens of police and FBI vehicles surround him tightly. Guns pointed straight at his head. Rader doesn't resist. He doesn't pull a gun. He just calmly turns off the engine. When handcuffed, Rader doesn't ask, "Why are you arresting me?" He looks at the detective and says a sentence full of disappointment. "You lied to me about the floppy disk, didn't you?" The detective replies, "That's right, Dennis. We lied." The innocence of the devil brought an end to his journey of crime. Immediately after realizing he had no way out, Dennis Rader did something that surprised the detectives. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't remain silent. He started talking. And he talked continuously for 30 hours. To Rader, this wasn't an interrogation. This was his moment to shine. He bragged about the cases like an artist explaining his masterpiece. He recounted every knot, every lie, and every tear of the victims with a morbid enthusiasm. Detective Ken Landwehr later recounted, he showed absolutely no remorse. He viewed killing people just like he viewed working as a civil servant. It was just a task he had to complete. June 27th, 2005. Rader pleaded guilty in court. He stood there in front of the victims' families and began to describe the 10 murders. The most terrifying thing wasn't what he said, but how he said it. He used cold, detached words. "I put down the target. The project was completed." He spoke about strangling an 11-year-old girl with a calm tone, as if describing how to change a car tire. The entire courtroom was stunned into silence. Many relatives had to cover their ears or run out to vomit. He didn't see human beings. He only saw objects. This is the banality of evil. The devil doesn't roar. The devil wears reading glasses and speaks with the tone of a neighborly uncle. But Rader's victims weren't just the 10 people who died. His victims were also his wife and 2 children. Carrie Rawson, his daughter, who grew up with the fake love of a kind father, now completely collapsed. She realized that the man who held her hand walking in the park, the man who taught her to fish, was the same man who killed the parents of other children. The judge called Rader the embodiment of evil and sentenced him to 10 consecutive life terms. He would never see the light of freedom again. He would die in prison. Before leaving, Rader casually said, "This is the beginning of the new chapter of my life." He was still delusional. He still thought he was the protagonist in a movie. Dennis Rader is currently incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility. He spends his days drawing, writing letters to sick fans, and still believes he is a criminal genius. But we know the truth. He is not a genius. He is just a pathetic narcissist, a cowardly bully hiding behind ropes and lies. And what is the most terrifying lesson from BTK? It is the mask. He wore it so perfectly that no one noticed, not even the wife who shared his bed for 30 years. Look at the neighbor mowing the lawn next to your house. Look at the man sitting at the next table. Do you really know who they are? Thank you for watching Strange Frequency. Please subscribe to the channel and beware of unlocked doors. End of video.